Hi, folks. Welcome back to the continuing story of my build of the Wingnut Wings SE5a. Perhaps you're wondering why the thumbnail shows cockpit detail of two planes which are definitely not the SE5a. Sopwith triplane and a Fokker D8. And you might notice that there are pilots in them, looking suspiciously like Reginald and Nigel. Well, fear not, or worry not, that they don't happen to be Reginald and Nigel, but they are their twins. And I decided to take that picture just to show that those two resin figures from Copper's State models do fit in the cockpits of 1/32nd scale aircraft. Now, unfortunately, those model kits weren't made by Wingnut Wings, or perhaps fortunately, as the case may be, because the Fokker D8 is from Meng. The Sopwith triplane is a Roden kit. And I think it's fair to say that Meng and Roden kits have what I would call a whole lot more slop or give or less precision in their parts and how they fit together than Wingnut Wing kits do. That does aid in the fact of trying to do a bit of kit bashing, in my opinion. The second thing is the cockpits of both the Fokker D8 and the Sopwith triplane are considerably wider, especially at the opening of the cockpit, than the SE5a. So, seeing them in another plane is nice, but will either of these guys fit in my Wingnut Wings kit, my model? And that's something I needed to determine sooner rather than later, since the cockpit detailing is the first part of the build for a Wingnut Wings Scout. Okay, we'll leave these guys for the moment and go to the instructions. And here is step one. Yes, indeed, it's the cockpit. Attaching the seat to the floor panel, putting in the seat cushion, a holder for the flare pistol, the joystick and some detailing around the joystick, seat belts, and a spare drum for the Lewis gun with its holder right in the front of the cockpit. Okay, so what have you done in the last 24 hours? Well, I did attach the seat to the floor panel. I did put in the flare gun with its holder. I did assemble the bits to the joystick, but they aren't attached to the floor pan yet. And I did snip out and sand the extra drum for the Lewis gun. Doesn't seem like a whole lot of work. And why in the world would I be making a video at this point? Well, and I haven't even attached the joystick yet or the spare drum. There's a reason for that. The first step is actually to say, do either of these figures, or do both of them, fit inside the fuselage and the cockpit area once I drop them into the seat and dry fit the whole process and see if the fuselage closes up? Well, I'll save you the suspense and let you know that Reginald isn't going to work. It isn't so much his upraised arm as that big fur collar around his jacket or coat. Of course, it's not fur. It's made out of stiff, inflexible resin, and it is just not going to slip. The cockpit opening will not slip around the combo of that jacket, collar, and arm when the cockpit is closed up, and you cannot slip the body down going in the other way. So, Reginald, you're not going to be my SE5 pilot, SE5a pilot. Good news is that Reginald will fit with a slight trim to the shoulders, each of the shoulders, and maybe a little bit off of his backside, and all will be well. But it's not enough to just drop, at this stage, drop in a figure and close up the cockpit and tape it and say all's good. No, I know from experience that Sir Peter Jackson and Richard Alexander must have had a guiding principle with Wingnut Wings kits that precision, precision, precision. And we're going to have almost zero tolerance in terms of deviation and variance. The pieces fit together beautifully, but there is very little leeway. You've got to get things right. And when you're adding an unknown element, and I also feel that perhaps back long ago, Jackson and Alexander talked and said, if we wanted pilot figures in our models, we would have included them. And in fact, we did include them. But they're standing up next to the plane where they belong, not obscuring the detail we choose to show you inside the cockpit. So anybody who wants to have a go at putting in an aftermarket pilot in the cockpit, good luck to you. Of course, that's something I just need to do, so I have to find a way to make it build. And I know that there are a lot of dependencies to get a flawless or almost seamless finish on the fuselage and cockpit area of the SE5a, because it is not just one half. There are lots of pieces involved. So while I may have only cemented a couple of pieces together, I spent a whole heck of a lot of time jiggling and slightly sanding edges to see if I could dry fit all of the critical components, the lower wing, which also has part of the floor panel, and then those various pieces of the top of the fuselage, which wrap around the cowling, the cover for the Vickers gun, the actual cover of the cowling that sits over the cockpit, and all of that stuff has to fit basically as if you just set it on top with only a panel line, not any seam. If you compensate by filling it up with sprue goo or something else, you're going to pay the price in terms of what happens when you want to align cabane struts and other things. I know this from experience. So anyway, the seat and the floor panel, those two pieces, well, this piece that you can see in the second step is sitting inside and placed in the appropriate spot inside the fuselage halves. I've got the masking tape there, not because the fit isn't good, but just so it doesn't jiggle as I push it around and look at it to make sure all the fit is good. And I, of course, took the pilot out because he isn't a perfect fit at this point. If he were sitting on the seat, the panel over the cockpit, I would not be able to tape down because his shoulders just sit a little bit too high. But that's an easy fix. However, all is not yet done in terms of dry fitting all of the critical pieces to ensure that when it comes time to cement in the various components inside the plane, we're not going to have a problem. And those being, there are two more bulkheads or pieces, cross-member frames, A47 and A36, that have to go in and be fitted. Of course, there's the detailing around the cockpit, the instrument panel itself, number 47, let's see, what piece is that? A25 and A46, the frame around the cockpit. All of that has to fit in perfectly. And then we have this piece, A38, which rises up at an angle from the inside, right in the middle there between the lower wing from the floor panel, and fits up under into the engine compartment. And then finally, we have D57, no, almost finally, D57, the ammunition feed for the Vickers machine gun, which fits underneath the cowling that is directly over, that encases and is above the Vickers gun and meets up with the instrument panel. And then we've got to get A67, the Vickers gun, properly positioned in place so that it feeds in without any problem under that panel there, and with the barrel or a portion of it poking out into the groove there in the adjoining piece, those two pieces. And, you know, some folks might say, well, what's the big deal? You know, you just take the pieces and paint them as appropriate and slap on your nice thin cement and everything will be fine. Not really. No, 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 no. No. As I said, tolerances are extraordinarily tight and precise. And if you get them right, you are in good stead for the final portions of the build. You know, once you've got all of that in place, you know then that your struts are going to align, that you really won't have an issue with the wing, etc. But if you got the fuselage just a kilter off with all of its components, there's going to be a problem. And I don't want that to happen. So I already know that this build involves as much dry fitting and sanding minute fractions and fractions of a millimeter off in order to get that perfect fit. And I know that any paint application, which really won't affect the outside, but it does affect internal pieces that have to be painted before, you know, this gets closed up. That requires more sanding too. I guess I can appreciate what Jackson and Alexander did and all of their technicians, but they could have allowed for things like a thin coat of paint. Well, that's just my humble opinion. Okay, enough about that. I may have only cemented a few pieces, but I believe I've made a lot of progress, and I'm encouraged at this stage, but I realize I've got a half a dozen pieces that will go inside here, and I have to ensure that once they're inside and importantly cemented down, the fit of the panels will be as good as this. Believe it or not, I'm not that worried about what happens in front of that with the engine, because I do know that's going to should drop pretty easily down on those shelves on the side with almost a free floating, I'll call it that, engine cover on the top. Okay, I don't think I'm going to do any more construction today. We'll leave it at that and get back to starting to detail the interior of the fuselage in terms of putting in braces, painting in wood effects, things like that. And more to come. And at some point, Nigel will have a home inside the cockpit. But that's still a long ways away. Thanks for watching.